In the Flanaess, we are told that there are several different races of humans, but how do you express that in the game? I want to talk about it today on Greyhawk Grognard. One of the great things about the world of Greyhawk is it strives for realism in a lot of really minor but really cool ways. And one of the ways they do that is by distinguishing between different races of humans, right? So there's not just like elves, dwarves, humans, halflings. There are uh, different strains of humans that come from different places and migrated into the Flanaess. And there's a lot of detail around that, and it usually doesn't get picked up and transferred into an actual Greyhawk game on the table. And I want to talk about both the different racial groups and the how you can kind of express that during the play of the game. So this comes from it's in the folio too, but I'm going to use the text out of here. Um, we have the Backloonish, the Flanaess, the Iridians, the Sulois, and there are also the Ullman folk and the Tuve, but those weren't covered in this book. They came along later. The Ullman are, of course, kind of a Mesoamerican from the Ullman Islands, and the Tuve are kind of a sub-Saharan African analog that we learn about in the Scarlet Brotherhood book. But to get to this, we have the Backloonish. The Backloonish are kind of a Middle Eastern mishmash, but one of the things about these human strains is that none of them actually have a one-to-one relationship with a real-world race, right? There isn't just these are Arabs, these are Europeans, these are whatever. They're their own thing. So it's a misnomer to say that, oh, I want to play an Arab character, I'm going to play a Backloonish, because that doesn't quite map one to one, and that's the same for any of these. Although there are analogous traits, that we see for all of them. So the Backloonish have golden hued skin tones. Eye color is gray, green, or gray, or green, with gray uncommon and hazel rare. Hair ranges from blue black to dark brown, and then it goes on about different admixtures of things like that. Because one of the other things about this is that there are also mixtures. So you'll have a Backloonish flan mix in one place, or a Iridian Sulois mix in another, and it tells you, how those work in terms of appearance and so forth. The flan have a bronze-colored complexion. This varies from lighter, almost copper shade, to a dark tone, which is deepest brown, and it goes on there. In the Duchy of Ten are pure flan, so you do have some outposts like that along the way, but most of the places in the world of the Greyhawk, they're kind of an admixture of different things. We have the Iridians, have skin tones ranging from tan to olive. They have hair which goes from honey blonde to black, eye color, and so forth. And then the Sulois, the fleeing Sul folk, were scattered in a broadcast fashion across the Flanaess, so that most tended to mix with other groups. The Sul races very fair-skinned, some being albino. They have light red, yellow, blonde, or platinum blonde hair. Eye color varies from pale blue or violet through deep blue, with gray occasionally occurring. Curly to kinky hair is common, and that's an interesting little thing because we don't see that a lot. Because the next sentence says, the inhabitants of the Duchy of Ernst are nearly pure Sul. The frost, ice, and snow barbarians are perfect specimens of unmixed Sulois blood. The nearly albinoid snow barbarians are the best example. But we don't really hear about the barbarians having curly hair. So it's not even there. Greyhawk's Vikings aren't like prototypical Vikings, because they're going to have like curly, kinky hair. There's little things like that. And of course, the Sulois are also the inhabitants of the jungles in the south. So they and there they have like really dark brown skin because they're freckled. So it's really neat. Now they're close and they have echoes, but they're not the same. And there are also the Renehi, the barge folk who live in and around the near dive. You can find them in Greyhawk and around the Velverdive River and so forth. That counts as another group, and they actually say they're from another world, which is kind of interesting. I wonder if there's any relationship between them and the Vistani. And then there's a section that gives like which admixtures are where. So, for example, in the city of Greyhawk, it is mostly Iridian and Sul, with some Flan and Backloonish strains as well. And then it tells you how if you're this, the skin color goes this way, and if you're that, the eye color goes this way, that kind of stuff. Um, but that tells us what they look like, and you could use that in the game if you really wanted to do your homework. When you're designing an NPC, you could say, okay, I've got to get somebody in my game from Radek, so he's going to be mostly Sul with some Iridian and some Flan. What does that look like? So you could choose the character's skin and hair and eye color based on that. That's a one way you can signal. If the players are very careful about it, about paying attention to those kinds of details, they'll be able to tell, okay, oh, he must be from somewhere which is mostly Sul and some Iridian and some Flan. Maybe somebody else would recognize where that would come from. So you could say, oh, he looks like he comes from such and such a place. That's one way. Another way is racial and national dress, which is the next section they have here. And this is a great way to signal where somebody comes from for like an NPC. And PCs could adapt this as well. If you wanted to give your players like a little cheat sheet about, okay, you're from so and so, most people from where you come from dress this way. So Suloi's folk have long used solid colors. Aristocratic houses have two or more such colors in their dress. So party-colored garments are not uncommon. I started to do this kind of thing when I was painting my miniatures for the Greyhawk war game I'm working on, which is kind of neat. You can take these little tidbits and details and get them into your paint scheme on your figures. Another thing to look about for that is in the monster manual. It tells you like wood elves dress in these colors and so forth. So it gives a little bit of extra Easter eggs in your figures when you do that. But I digress. Um, Dress was originally loose pantaloons topped by a baggy blouse. This form of dress has been changed to meet the needs of the varying climates. So the northern Sulois barbarians wear skins and furs, while those in the southernmost area have replaced the blouse with vest-like upperwear. Flanaess once wore brightly hued body paints with yellow ochre and vermilion. The rovers of the barons still use body painting. The more civilized Flan dress in the mode currently fashionable in their portion of the continent. Garments, however, tend to be of solid primary colors with very bright hues predominant. So, again, little hints. Oh, that guy's wearing clothes and he's got a bright yellow top and and pants. So, okay, you could say, okay, well, and he's got brown skin. Okay, so he's probably Flan, and that might give you an idea where he's from. Backloonish peoples are of two sorts. The northern branch favors bright patterns and gaudy colors. They wear gowns and robes, or else short breeks and flowing coats. The poorer folk even wear gaudy prints, although their garments are a one-piece coverall. Things like that. I'm not going to read the whole section, but you can signal where people uh, are from. Where NPCs are from, and so forth by their dress. So that's one way to get it in there. Now, another thing to bear in mind, though, when we're talking about all this, different human races and strains and so forth, this is an important thing about this. Um, in the central region of the Flanaess, from the western duchy of Ernst to Jeff, there is little heed paid to either skin color or racial type, whether human or demi-human or even humanoid in some places. The main exception to this is the demi-human kingdoms, where humankind is judged inferior, especially in Selene. And I would also point out that in the Scarlet Brotherhood, obviously, they are Suloi supremacists. But that's a relatively rare thing. And of course, in the Great Kingdom, they're proud of their light skin, and in the Duchy of Ten, they're proud of their bronze skin. So there's kind of exceptions in there, but just bear in mind, this shouldn't be a huge deal in a lot of places. This is more to add some detail, add some little pieces here and there that the players can use as kind of Easter eggs. Now, another way of expressing this in the game is through language, because not only are there different types of humans, but there are many, many different types of languages. And of course, most of these languages are derived from the human types that they come from. So, for example, um, there are five real languages in the Flanaess. There's the common tongue, which everybody's going to speak. pretty much. We'll get there in a second. Sulois, Flan, Ancient Backlunish, and Old Iridian. Sulois became all but extinct when the Reign of Colorless Fire destroyed the Empire. It is rarely spoken except by scholars, and it's mainly useful for being able to read and decipher old texts that from the ancient Sulois Empire or immediately thereafter. Flan is the oldest living language still spoken. The Tenha still speak Flan, although a corrupted version and a stagnant language. It is difficult to translate modern concepts into Flan. So if you find a Flan speaker who doesn't speak Common, it might be difficult to communicate, which is an interesting thing. Ancient Backlunish, the the Paynim tribe still speak it, although traders and educated people must learn Common because Common is what, as it says on the tin, it's the common tongue. It's what everybody is supposed to know, although they don't. Old Iridian, as a results it is kind of an isolated language, right? So as a result of its being free of influences, its linguistic components are unique, and translation into any language except Common is all but impossible. That could be an interesting plot point if you find somebody who only speaks Old Iridian, some farmer or whatever who has an important thing to tell you about something. You're going to have to, you might have to do a little translating there. Um, if you need to move it from one language to the other. And then there's the Common Tongue, which is a combination of Ancient Backlunish and Old Iridian. Virtually anybody who crosses national boundaries must know a smattering of Common or be greatly handicapped. So it's not universal, right? Not everybody doesn't speak Common, and that's an important thing to remember. You could very easily end up in some backwards area of like the Great Kingdom or something, or in some tiny little a woodland hamlet or whatever, where they just speak Old Iridian. And, if you don't know Old Iridian, you're going to be in trouble. There are also some other languages and subtongues. Feral, the Cold Tongue, which is spoken by the Northern Barbarians, Kaolandish, Nyrondese, Volandi, and Lendorian. Feral is cool because it used to be an Iridian tribal language, and now it's like used by the officials of the Iron League as a secret code. It's like battle language. It's not a living language. It's literally reserved for private secret communications among the Iron League, which kind of recalls the code talkers in World War II, which is kind of cool. Nyrondese, it is spoken by peasants, shopkeepers, and the like in areas of Nyron. So you when you're traveling through Niron, you might not be able to communicate with the innkeeper because, well, the innkeeper's probably going to know some Common, but most shopkeepers and farmers and stuff, they're not going to be able to understand Common. So you might have some issues there. Talked about the Cold Tongue. Volandi is the old Iridian tribal language in Furiondi Voluna. Those who speak only Common cannot understand it. Important again. Kaolandish, it is spoken. This is a dialect of Old High Iridian with local admixtures. It is spoken in areas in and around Kaolan. And Lendorian is an obscure dialect of Sulois spoken in the Spindrift Islands, later named the Lendor Isles. It has no relation to the Cold Tongue and is a secondary language to those who speak Common. So if you know Lendorian, you're going to know Common. So that's another way you can do that. Is be very cognizant and maybe make that an issue for the players. Right? You say. They're going to just assume everybody can talk to everybody like it's an episode of Star Trek. But if you if you throw in some NPCs who don't speak Common, then you're going to present the players with a real conundrum, and those are the kind of fun things that they can try to figure out a way around it. It becomes something they have to overcome without being particularly dangerous, unless there's a ticking clock going, and they need this information now, which could be fun in and of itself. So that's another way I could bring it into my game at the table, is by paying attention to those racial languages, to those languages and subtongues of the racial groups, and in particular geographical locations. And you could turn that into kind of a fun little obstacle that the PCs have to overcome. You could even play it for laughs and have it be kind of fun. And that's yet another way that this can be done practically. Now, something else you can do is assign personality traits to your NPCs based on their racial makeup, and this idea comes from the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer, because they took the subgroup descriptions, and they kind of added a new feature to it, and that is the idea that different human subgroups have different personality traits. And so, for example, in the Iridians, ancient Iridians were fierce warriors, yet they were all self-sacrificing and loyal. These traits are not evident today, but many Iridians do remain temperamental and prone to violence. They have a preference for strict social order, usually fitting themselves at the top, and their military traditions are strong. Aggression is often channeled into political conflict and subterfuge. In peacetime, they are practical, hardworking, and not inclined to intellectual pursuits. So you could take those, and they have them for the other things. Not going to go through them all. You could take those traits and map them onto NPC things, and I actually did that several years ago. There's an article, if you go on greyhawkgrognard.com under the free resources section. I did a Dragon magazine article where I took that idea, assigned them to the different human subtypes, and then I further divided those onto the racial admixtures. So if one land was all Iridian and a little bit of Sul and Flan, I would map the percentages of different personality traits, and I did up a whole bunch of um, tables, so that if you're in the Duchy of Ernst, you roll this, then the NPC is going to have this personality trait based on those traits and the percentages of admixture that we see in the guide. So it was a neat bit of Excel work on my part, but it turned out really well. And just go to the website and go to free resources, and you'll find it there under the Dragon magazine articles. But you could do that. You don't even need the tables to do that. You could just say, oh, there's the Sulois are cruel and vicious, and yada yada yada, and you can work out NPC personality traits for them there too. So that's yet another way you can express this at the table. So that's it. I hope this has been fun and informative about not only do they exist in the books, but there are ways you can actually have it make a difference at the table. You can have it in terms of physical appearance, giving clues to where an NPC comes from, to dress, doing the same thing, and being a neat way you can hook it into your miniatures if you're going to paint figures for your characters and NPCs. You can do it in terms of personality traits, and you can especially do it in terms of language. That could really be something you can have a real impact on the table. And I've actually got some of these racial subtype things in my Greyhawk Player's Guide, which is available on DM's Guild. I'll put a link here someplace if you're interested in that. If you want to play, it is for 5e, so just be forewarned. But it does take some of the older stuff and updates it for the new version of the rules. So anyway, I hope you like this one. Do let me know what you think in the comments. If you have ever used these things in your game, I would love to hear about it. And hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will talk to you all later. One of the other things they have, though, is national dress. Um, so we have here the on the table. So I've got also some of these things covered in my player's guide to Greyhawk. If you my Greyhawk Greyhawk player's guide, or whatever it's called.